Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. This show is brought to you by the International Affairs Forum of Traverse City and comes to you from the studios of Up North Media. Karen Puschel is the producer. I'm your host, Jack Segal. Our topic today is Cuba. On December 17, 2014, Presidents Barack Obama and Raul Castro announced that the United States and Cuba would restore diplomatic ties which were severed in 1961. Successive U.S. administrations have maintained a policy of economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation that has made life on that island just 90 miles from our shores exceptionally difficult. The change in the country's relations, initially marked by a prisoner swap and Havana's release of a jailed U.S. contractor, prompted some experts to point to better prospects for a rapid change in our relationship, and perhaps even for U.S. relations more broadly in Latin America. But the U.S. trade embargo, which requires congressional approval to be rescinded, is a political hot-button issue in Washington. Whether the embargo can be lifted anytime soon remains to be seen. Getting a sense of how the change in our bilateral relationship is seen in Cuba, particularly by young Cubans, has been next to impossible. But through the efforts of the International Affairs Forum board member, Robert Giles, we have been very fortunate to have the opportunity to hear directly from one of Cuba's most influential young bloggers. She spoke on February 19th to a full house at the Millikan Auditorium, despite sub-zero temperatures, I might add. She's a professor at the University of Havana, Cuba, who is spending this academic year as a fellow in the Nieman Foundation program at Harvard University, the only Cuban educator currently participating in that program. She's here to give you a view into the Cuba of today and hopefully the Cuba of the future. Elaine Diaz Rodriguez, welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here, and it's wonderful to have you in Traverse City, particularly.
It's a great pleasure for me to be here.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Maybe we could start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your growing up in Cuba. You're quite young. You're less than 30 years old.
Yes.
So the revolution is ancient history for you.
Yes.
Tell us about your life in Cuba.
Well, I grew up in this small town located like 20 miles away from Havana, the capital of the country. I grew up in Campo Florido. It's mainly composed, it's a fairly large area composed by almost 10,000 people. And the people who live there are almost children of farmers or grandchildren of farmers, as was my case, or even farmers. So it's a place really quiet where you mainly harvest things, and it's really far from the city right now.
So did you have animals, and what kind of farm was it? What did you do?
Well, we had horses and cows and pigs, and I grew up with all of that. And
Horses,
we gathered tomatoes when I was a kid, and watermelon, guavas, and everything you can have for meal. So it was really important for us in order to survive to the crisis of the 90s during in Cuba.
Now, at a very young age, you advanced very rapidly to become a professor. How were you educated? Where did you go to school?
Well, I went to a boarding school located like just outside the Havana city, and it's a school for kids who wants to learn like academic, like science, what we call hard science, specifically mathematics and biology, or chemistry and physics. So I went there and I applied for the University of Havana. I really wanted to become a journalist, so I applied, I passed the test, and then I studied for 5 years at the University of Havana. When I get graduated, I received a proposition from the University of Havana to become professors. They were starting to teach digital journalism, which is journalism related to internet and social media and blogs and all of that. And they were really, really interested on having the students training on that. So they say, we need young people to do this. And they made me that proposition, and of course I accept. And I started teaching in 2008, like a few months after I graduated. And I think it has been a great experience. I was teaching at the very beginning to students just like 2 or 3 years younger than me, so it was quite challenging.
I'll bet it was, yes. And it's interesting that the government is interested in having young bloggers and young journalists. We think of Cuba as having a very controlled media environment. Maybe they have that, and but it seems like they're looking forward a little bit. What do you think is going on?
I think for the Cuban media environment right now is quite interesting. We have, according to the Constitution and according to all the Cuban laws, all the public media are run by the state. So we don't have an open press, or we don't have a press run by companies or any other private form of businesses. We also have like 40 correspondents for foreign press agencies, and they have been based in Cuba since a long time ago. And there is a growing number of these companies that they are hiring young professionals. People that just go graduated and go work there, and they start writing about the Cuban society, and they present another reality. What is really interesting too is to look at the blogosphere as a new ecosystem of media and communication and production of Cuban reality. The people running the blogs are really young people that have something to say, and usually they don't find a place to say that in the national newspapers or even in all the newspapers run by the state. So they are going to internet even when we have a really small and low access, and they are telling like really and deeply personal stories, mainly in the first person, and mainly things that has happened to them. So it's quite interesting. It's a really diverse ecosystem right now, and I think it will be more diverse in a short term.
Mm-hmm. So I think we then have maybe a little bit uninformed view of what's going on, because it sounds like if you're writing a blog, you can say pretty much all you want. Is that the case, or can you be arrested by the secret police at some point?
I think that's not exactly. It depends on what you're writing. For example, the political opposition has a really hard time on writing things. I mean, they have been arrested after public demonstrations when they're working on the street, mainly on the Human Rights Day, and mainly the groups like Ladies in White and all of that groups. But people who are not recognized who doesn't recognize themselves as political oppositors, they have been, or as political opposition, they have been writing in their blogs, and I think they have received phone calls or even pressures or sanctions from state-run organizations. But it's not that you are going to jail because of that. In the case of this specific people, I think there is like a fight between two different forms of think about the Cuban reality and the Cuban domain of public communication. And I think both sides have been like pushing each other in a good way, and something good has been like arising from that.
So there is some movement that you can detect in this sphere of information.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, you can see a lot of young people writing blogs right now. When you see at the Cuban blogosphere, we started in 2008 with 174 blogs. Now we have more than 1,000 blogs written from Cuba. And mainly that blogs in 2008 were political, and they were talking about this politics in Cuba, and some of them were run by official journalists that were writing for the newspapers, national newspapers, and they were replicating exactly what they say in the national newspapers on their blogs. And when you see at the blogosphere right now, it's more diverse. I mean, a lot of people are talking about almost everything: society, healthcare, education, corruption, the day-to-day life in Cuba. So it's incredibly refreshing to see what is going on in Cuba throughout the eyes of these young people that are writing on blogs.
That's interesting. Now, let me ask you about a little more about the Cuban society today. We've heard that the education system is good, that the healthcare is universal and inexpensive. Are these things just propaganda from the Cuban government, or is it a reality?
I don't think so. I think it's a reality. I mean, one of the main triumphs of the revolution is providing healthcare, universal and free healthcare at all the levels for Cuban population. That's huge. that's really good. I mean, when you can have access to any medical treatment or any medicines for a really low price, and in the case of medical treatment for free, that's a huge thing for the Cuban population. And when you think on the Cuban healthcare system, we are even sending 400 people to Africa to fight against Ebola. We have Cuban doctors all over Latin America, and we have also this training program that keeps bringing people from all over the world to study medicine in Cuba for free. So sometimes the government of that countries are paying for that, but when you compare to other universities in the world, it's so cheap. So we also have students from the United States coming to Cuba to study medicine, which is really good. And I think the medicine in Cuba, the healthcare system, has this perspective on it, and it's really based on a really humanistic perspective that the people is the most important thing. And I think that's a huge thing when you analyze Cuban reality. On the other hand, the education system is also free and is universal at all the levels: primary school, secondary school, high school, university, and even master and PhD programs, which is great. But the salaries are really low. So we have been facing crises in the educational level where we have been facing that professors left the job because of the low salaries, and that could reduce the level of the education in
the
Cuba.
more ambitious would want to go work for a foreign news agency or something.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, what do you mean by low? What does a professor, may I ask, at the University of Havana make?
For example, a professor at the University of Havana with a master's degree can earn almost $30 a month, which
$30
is pretty
a
low.
month.
Yes.
That's low. Yes, that's low.
Really low.
Even we can understand that. Yeah. So, what does the state provide? Do you have free housing, free food, or how does it work?
No, they don't provide free housing and free food, but for example, in the case of Cuba, most of the people own their own houses. And one thing that is happening in Cuba is that we have like 3 or 2 generations living in the same house. So that's really difficult, right? That's really rushed. And in the case of food, for example, the state provide like one kind of food subsidized on these spaces called bodega, which is like a cellar where they sell you rice and beans.
So it's like not a supermarket, but a place where you could get basic foods.
Exactly, it's a place run by the state where you can buy food at the highly subsidized prices, but it's not enough. For example, you have access to 6 eggs a month, which is not that good.
I hear the eggs are good, though.
Yes, it's tasty. It's tasty.
So it's very organic, but it's hard.
Yes, everything is organic.
But there's not enough of it.
That's so good. Yeah.
When you look at the future in Cuba, you have these 2 old men. One is a little older than the other. You have Fidel Castro, who we know about, people my generation. We lived through the revolution. First of all, the Batista dictatorship and the crime and corruption, then the revolution, and then the bad relationship began with the United States, the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Cuban Missile Crisis, all this connections with Soviet Union, and that sort of colors our image of Cuba. Is any of that relevant today, or are we just now, is that such ancient history that it's not even a factor anymore?
I think that the worst thing that can happen to Cuba is forget. I mean, is lose the memory of the history. History is important in order to improve. I mean, when you are facing right now that young people doesn't know anything about Batista dictatorship, and it was really bloody, and it was a lot of corruption. So every pastime is not a good idea in the case of Cuba. So in order to look forward to the future and improve the things in Cuba, I think it's important to get back and have a deeply conversation about the past in Cuba, about what happens, how we got here, and the relationship, for example, between Cuba and United States is really, really complicated. So it's not just like we are going to sit together now, we are going to negotiate, and we are going to fix the things in 1 year. I think it will be a long process, and it will be a long process because a lot has happened. So you cannot forget the past. And I think we need, as a journalist, as a people, citizens, we need to bring that back to the conversation, that past, in order to analyze better the future.
That's very interesting. I teach a class at Northwestern Michigan College, and we are talking about Cuba and for the students who are born in 1997, 98. They're quite young. They really don't have that historical reference point yet, so they will get it from me, hopefully. But also from some of the students were in the audience last night, and some will watch you on television. Which is very helpful, and I thank you for providing that extra insight that we're getting.
No, thank you.
Now, if we look ahead, we have the Castro brothers, and what is their role in Cuban society today? Are they still important?
I think, for example, Fidel Castro until 2006 was really important figure in Cuba. When he got sick and he stepped back, I think he has been like. He has been he has this presence in Cuba media for over 2 years, writing these reflections, and I think he has stopped writing about it. And some people even think that he stopped writing because the negotiation between Cuba and United States was taking place. I don't know. We don't have information about that. But I think he has also pretty much support in Cuba because all the historical depth that previous generations think they have toward these men that liberate the country from a bloody dictatorship. In the case of Raúl Castro, he's not as pragmatic as his brother. He's not such as a good public speaker as his brother. But he has been taking or approving economical reforms, which has been impacting in a good way in the Cuban population. So when you think about what Raúl Castro has done in 6 years, it started by releasing the cell phones, for example, for Cuban people. Cuban people can now have cell phones. It was forbidden before. Cuban people can sell and buy houses, can sell and buy cars. So it has been approving a lot of economical reforms that seems to be weird before. I mean, I don't imagine a Cuba without having access to that rights, basic rights, but it was like that. So he has like more support in the economical level. I don't know if in the symbolic level, for example, I don't think Cuban people wants to have 2 old guys running the country forever.
Well, they won't last forever.
Exactly, exactly. It doesn't make any sense. So if we are going to think about Cuba, I think Cuban people are ready for having a completely new national debate on politics and the way we want to have the future of the country when the Castros are gone.
Well, there are different models for a communist system to transition to a different system. In China, Deng Xiaoping came along and did the economic things that sound a little bit like what Raúl Castro is doing. In Russia, there was an attempt to go directly to a democratic election system, and that seems to have run into significant problems. Is there any political process? I mean, we like to think of elections as politics, but if there are no political parties, if there's no participation except in the Communist Party, then how do you move from where you are now to a more open political structure? Or is that far in the future in your mind?
I think they are trying to fix the economy first. So they are doing all these economical reforms first. For example, they approved the foreign investment law to attract foreign capital to Cuba. They approved a lot of measures to open, for example, for private businesses in Cuba owned by Cubans residents in the island. They are taking these steps at the economical level, and they are saying, which is interesting, we are not facing a political reform. We are not right now talking about dismantle the political system or the socialist system, but you cannot face an economical reform without impact in the political level. So I think we are now in this economical level of debate, but we will go forward on a political debate. For example, a lot of people are talking about the reform of the Constitution. A lot of people are discussing the rights, the main, most important rights like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press. A lot of people, when you have this foreign media coming to Cuba and hire young journalism, you are facing a huge debate on what the media should be, because you have people that used to work for national newspapers and papers run by the state, including in private newspapers run from Miami or from other countries, but it's like a dual media ecosystem. And when you think on that, we are facing like all these debates in the society right now, and it's almost on the ground. It's not taking place, for example, at the parliament level, but it's taking place in the society. And I think we will need like a couple of years to figure out what are we going to do in the political landscape. But we have been witnessing the rise of a lot of collective group of people, like getting together to form coalitions on environment, to protect the environment, or to talk about internet access in Cuba and all of these huge topics. I think when all of that people get together, they will form maybe a political force.
So over a period of years or maybe even decades, it will take that time for these interest groups like the environment group to develop into a political force that will want to participate.
I think 2018 will be an interesting year for Cuba because according to the law, Raul Castro had to step back and there will be general elections, and somebody for the first time with no Castro's background, we have to take the power of the country. And I think that would be a really an important year to open up the debate. But I think from 2015, when we are now, until 2018, there will be a lot of good and deep conversations on the Cuban future on all the landscape, not just economical, but the political one too.
Now, in the politicians who represent the southern Florida districts and the state of Florida have been critical of this new relationship that President Obama and President Castro announced. What is their thinking? How do you understand their views from the perspective of a young Cuban? What do you think they want?
I think they are trying to pressure the country, and as Obama said on December 17, we need to open a new relationship with Cuba because we have been doing this failed policy. So pressuring Cuba is never a good idea. Cuba has never answered to pressure, even during the missile crisis. So when you look at the history of Cuba and you look like all the people ready to die for what they think was right or what the president think was right, you have a really nationalistic and a strong country. So I think Cuba doesn't respond well to any foreign pressure. And what all these congressmen and congresswomen has been trying to do in the case of Miami toward Cuba is pressure the Cuban government to opening the society and improvement and improve the human rights on this policy, and it has been doing nothing. I mean, it has failed systematically.
So that was their precondition for opening and normalizing the relationship, was Cuba had to move first. Cuba had to change, or we won't reward Cuba with this. And that's not the way to do it in your mind.
No, I think the better way to approach to face a Cuban-United States conversation is like we are doing right now, with respect for this country, for the other country. We are discussing everything from human rights, freedom of speech, or counterterrorism, protection of ecosystem, and we have been immigration. For example, we have almost 2 million Cubans living here, so we have to talk about immigration in both countries, and I think we need to respect the dignity of the other country. If we face a Cuban conversation trying to push the Cuban government, we will have a failed policy as it has been in the last couple of years.
So you mentioned the word respect and mutual respect, and even for a young person like yourself, there's a pride of being Cuban and being independent and not sort of falling over when the United States says to do things. It's still in your generation as well, is it?
Yes. Yeah. I strongly believe that the indicated people to decide the future of Cuba are Cuban citizens. I strongly appreciate, having living here in the United States for more than 6 months, I have learned so much. I have learned a lot. I have learned from people in the street. I have been listening to what everybody has to say about Cuba or about anything else, even about your country. But I think the better way to face the future of Cuba is leaving that to the Cuban people. We have the right to decide what we want for our country in the future. We have a nationalistic history. We have a really independent history. We Perhaps we will take a lot of time figuring out what we want to do, but I think that United States has to let Cuba do the things the way we the Cubans want.
So as this thing now begins to open up, do you recommend that people go to Cuba, and should they just go to Havana, or should they try to backpack around the island?
I strongly recommend all the Americans to go to Cuba.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the best way to learn about Cuba. If you want to learn about history, talk to old people. If you want to learn about anything in Cuba, go there. Stay away from the tourist places.
Mm-hmm.
The tourist places everywhere are designed to present a better or most beautiful image of the country. So stay away from these places and go to talk to people. Cuban people are really friendly. They are really warm. They will try to help you even if they don't understand your language. So go there, talk to people, and experience the country in the first hand. I think it's the better way to understand what's going on in Cuba right now.
Now we only have a couple minutes left, so maybe you've been here now just over a day, but you're going to stay another day, and we very much appreciate that. We've had you running all over town at the Ron Jolly Show, at WTCM, at NMC, and you've met students there, and you're going to do some sightseeing this afternoon, and you'll be at you're going to go to Little Fleet this evening. You've had a very successful visit. What are your impressions of Traverse City in Michigan?
Oh my God, I love Traverse City. You guys gave me the best excuse to leave Boston. I have been living in Boston. I experienced 4 storms in a couple of weeks, and I was exhausting of 2 feet of snow. So I have been loving the experience. I have been talking to so many people. Everybody is so respectful. They are so eager to know more about Cuba. They really appreciate to have a Cuban vision from the first hand experience. I have been talking with high school kids. I have been talking with people who are going to visit Cuba in May. And I have just had a great time. I really, really appreciate it, and I'm really grateful to you and to everybody who has been so warm to me.
Well, we are very appreciative to you, and we thank Robert Giles, who was the director of the Nieman Foundation program at Harvard, and who alerted us to the possibility that you might be able to come. Thank you very much for coming to Traverse City. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for Beyond the Headlines. Our guest today has been Elaine Diaz Rodriguez, professor at the University of Havana, Cuba, a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University. And she's shared with us, I think, a wonderful insight into the Cuba of today and the Cuba of the future. Thank you for joining us.